Hey, folks, you're listening to the Jobs Podcast. I am your host, Tim Hendricks. Today we have Brian Weiler with us. He is the Director of Aviation at the Springfield Branson National Airport. He's been doing that for quite a while. Welcome, Brian.
Glad to be here, Tim.
So, Brian, let's start off like we always do with a little bit of an origin story of where you were born, your upbringing, and your early influences, and maybe how you found yourself being the director of an airport.
Okay. I don't know that it's anything particularly inspiring, and my childhood I don't think was anything that spectacular. I was born and raised in mid-Missouri, Jefferson City. My parents were two state employees, retired with over 75 years of combined service, and my dad worked for correction, my mom worked for agriculture. We had pretty humble background, never flew on an airplane, never saw the ocean. And at a high school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I was working at McDonald's, and I let some buddies talk me into joining the United States Marine Corps. And I thought, if I'm going to do it, I might as well go in full boat, and thought, here's a chance to see the world. And I'd listened to some people, and they said, hey, if you do it, you take a test, don't go in open contract. So I took, I think it was called the ASVAB test.
Okay.
And apparently did well enough. I wasn't particularly smart in high school, but I always was able to, I don't know about you, but if I'm having trouble sleeping at night, I'll build a deck, or I'll build a shed or something in my mind. So I think I thought spatially, and where I came out of the test is that I should be an air traffic controller. And that was my first introduction into aviation. Had really, other than I don't know, just so I thought, well, that sounded interesting. So I went in the Marine Corps, just did one and done, one tour. Turned out to be a really pivotal experience for me. It gave me some discipline, put me in touch with some outstanding mentors that really helped me. So 19 years of age, I was working approach control at Marine Corps Air Station, Kaneohe Bay, Hawaii. And I was lucky to have some really good officers and senior non-commissioned officers that, I don't know about took me under my wing, but, just said, hey, Weiler, what do you want to do with your life? And, and the thing about joining the Marine Corps, you go through the booze period and the party period and different things like that. And I'm saying I did my fair share of that. Mm-hmm. But I kind of thought, okay, what do I want to do with my life? And so I started taking some college courses and really enjoyed aviation. But no, that was kind of my first introductory to aviation. And then do you want me to just keep talking about how I got into airport management?
Well, yeah, sure. It's anybody that has their first assignment at 19 at an airport in Hawaii. That's a pretty rough assignment. I mean,
it was rough. I don't get a lot of sympathy for that.
Yeah, right.
And then you got kind of two parts of the Marine Corps. You got, recon, infantry, gung ho, charge a hill. And then you got the air wing. And, the air wing, once a month we checked out our rifle and cleaned it. We tested every quarterly. But for physical training, we did volleyball on the beach. I worked shifts as an air traffic controller. I lived outside in town. And so honestly, it was a lot like a regular job. But you still had the Marine Corps stuff sprinkled in there. But no, sure. I'm not going to say I had any really tough duty. But when I did finish my first tour in the Marine Corps and got out, I was lucky enough that I had gotten some credit hours for my military service through a university called Embry-Riddle, which is kind of like the Harvard of aviation. So I ended up getting, finished up my last year when I got out in Daytona Beach, Florida, another great garden spot. And so I picked up my undergraduate degree it's called professional aeronautics, but I had an emphasis in airport management and air traffic control. And so, it's funny. I think this was the late 80s. And I thought, well, I'm going to start out and be like the deputy director at Lambert, or I'm going to go, run operations at LaGuardia or something like that. So at that time, I joke with my kids, as far as I sent out these blind letters trying to find a job and nothing. It was a different time. The economy was not very well. Yeah. So I moved back to Jefferson City and started pumping gas at the local airport, which I'll tell you is a little demeaning. Here I am with my bachelor's degree, and I really couldn't find a job. But I thought, I might as well stay in the industry. So I pumped gas at the Jefferson City Flying School Flying Service there in Jefferson City, which is referred to as a fixed base operator. They're kind of the gas station for airports.
Okay.
And I really enjoyed that job. And I tell people today, because we run the FBO at our airport today, that's probably, I learned more about aviation and customer service in that job. Because I mean, you're literally having super VIPs come in, you're dealing with them, but you're fueling gas, you're cleaning the toilets out of the aircraft. But I did that for a year, and I thought, well, I got to do something. So I ended up going up to Warrensburg, University of Central Missouri, and getting a master's in aviation safety.
Hmm.
And that was another big part of that. And because I was prior military and I was a graduate student, they gave me a graduate assistantship. So I taught a couple freshman courses to help get the tuition covered. And I continued to be an adjunct professor really for 20 years beyond that. But got my master's degree in aviation safety, and then my first job out of grad school, I was able to find a job. Was being an airport planner. So I worked for an engineering firm that you work with mainly small airports. So I worked with small airports in Kansas, in Colorado, in a little bit in New Mexico, writing what's called an airport master plan, which is a 20-year development plan for your airport. But I always had in the back of my mind, I wanted to be an airport manager at that time. So I was actually working on the airport master plan up in St. Joseph, Missouri at Rosecrans Airport, north of Kansas City, when their airport manager left. And I was young. I mean, I was 26 years old, didn't really know what I was doing. I freely admit it. But I knew the city manager. I knew the public works director because I'd worked for them on their master plan. And I thought, why not? I'll throw my name in the hat. And I got it.
Hmm.
So at 26 years old is when I had my first airport. I'm now on my fifth airport that I've managed. But, did that from 1992 to 94. And I don't know if some of your listeners, they remember in 1993, there was a major, and I mean a major flood on the Missouri and the Mississippi rivers.
Yeah.
And actually, my airport in St. Joseph and some 20 airports went underwater during the summer 93 flood because it was a 500-year plus 3 feet. It was so tall, but my airport went underwater, and that looked really, really good on a resume. So I did that job for, I want to say 2.5, 3 years. Then I went down and ran an airport in Martin County, Florida, just north of West Palm Beach on the east coast of Florida. Did that for 2.5 years. And then I went back up to the Midwest and ran the Johnson County Airport Commission up in Kansas City. That's around the Overland Park, Olathe area of Southwest Kansas City. I ran Johnson County Executive and New Century Air Center, which are two reliever airports. I picked up my pilot's license along the way, and I had done an internship at MoDOT, believe it or not, when I was in grad school. And they have, a lot of people think of MoDOT as roads and bridges, but they also do really all modes of transportation. It's just that they don't own them. They work with cities, counties, private railroads on regulating them and doing grants and different things like that. So I became the youngest state aviation director in the country at 31 years of age, and where I ran the state's aviation programs. And so we ran the grant programs predominantly for smaller airports. And I know I'm going off on all kinds of tangents here,
That's okay.
but there are about 110 public use airports in the state of Missouri. Now, most people think, oh, well, airports, that's like KCI and Lambert and Springfield Branson. Those are commercial service airports. There are only 9 of those, but there are a lot of general aviation airports. So it'd be like, Bolivar, Aurora, Jefferson City, smaller airports that don't have airline service, but they serve the general aviation public. So I worked with all of them on improvement projects to do runway projects and extensions. And we built a few airports along the way. And I did that for 4 years and really enjoyed it. But, by that time, I was married and had 4 kids by then. And we needed to make more money because state government didn't pay very well.
Kids are expensive. Yeah.
Kids are expensive. So I was looking around, and I worked within a division of MoDOT called the Multimodal Division, which ran all of the non-highway modes: aviation, railroads, waterways, public transportation, and freight development. And the division director retired, and I was a section head running aviation. So I went ahead and put in for it and was selected and became MoDOT's what's called multimodal director. So it was more of a higher level. I worked a lot with the state legislature because I ran the programs that were paid for with state general revenue, such as Amtrak, intercity passenger rail between Kansas City and St. Louis, OATS, public transportation, port projects on the Missouri and Mississippi rivers. And I did that for 10 years. So aviation was still part of my job, but because aviation has dedicated fuel tax funding, a good portion of my work was on rail and transit issues. And I did that for 10 years, gave me a lot of exposure to the political world, but 10 legislative sessions was enough, and I was ready for something different. And that's when I worked for the MoDOT Commission, and one of the commissioners was Jim Anderson, who was the chamber president of Springfield at the time. And they approached me about, hey, would you maybe be interested in putting in to become the director of the Springfield branch of the National Airport? And that was shortly after the new terminal was built in 2009. Mm-hmm. And I thought, this sounds like an exciting opportunity. So I put my name in the hat and was ultimately selected. And I, Tim, I came down here thinking I'll be here 5 years and I'll just move on to a larger airport because I wanted to get back into airport management. And then we just fell in love with the community. The airport's growing like crazy. I've got a great team of a little over 100. I really enjoyed working with the community. And here it is now, 14 years later, and I still love it here. And I've had opportunities to move on, but, honestly, just nothing has been as attractive as where I'm at.
When you get older, I think being happy sometimes will trump over a little bit more currency or a more prestigious position, because if all the other boxes are ticked and you're content, you're making it work, that's worth a lot.
Very much so. And when you go to the super large airports, there's definitely a lot more politics, which is fine. I'm comfortable in that environment, but it probably has more to do with the position, has more to do with who you know, not what you know. And I guess I like here, it's kind of a little bit of both. I still get to work all those angles, but Springfield's very collaborative. We have, again, pulled together some really cool projects. I'm part of the city. But also we're what's known as an enterprise fund. So we receive no local tax support. We generate all of our own funding from user fees, rents, and charges. So a lot of cases we run like the business. And under the city charter, going back decades, the city council has turned over a lot of the management of the airport to what's called an airport board. So they're an 11-member citizen board that are they're recommended by city council and confirmed by, recommended by city manager, confirmed by city council. So really, they keep a lot of the local politics out of the airport management, and they're focused on running the best airport we can and being agile and innovative. And it's just a really good environment that I enjoy very much.
I've never met a Marine that wasn't successful when they applied themselves. And you strike me, the guys that I work with that work either current or former Marines, they are just driven. They just kind of start checking boxes, and you talk with them 10 years after you first met them, and they've got a list of accomplishments a mile long. And yours it's sounding very familiar to some of the folks that I've talked with that were Marines. So
it's funny you say that, Tim. I literally, over the weekend, I still keep in touch with probably 6 of my boot camp buddies that we went to boot camp 40 years ago. And we get together every milestone, every 3 or 4 years around the Marine Corps birthday or whenever we graduated. And there is definitely a brotherhood. And I think anybody in the military, I do look at people with prior service and things. Am I a little biased towards the Marine Corps? Of course, but I'm not going to argue with you.
You had said early on in your conversation that you just went at a young age, you said, I want to be an airport manager. what was it about that position that you liked? And to take that question a little bit further, you didn't have, like, I can see if your dad was a pilot or your mom was in the air industry or she was an airport manager or something, an early influence. What was it about the friendly skies, to borrow a phrase, that
Sure.
just really kind of drew you in? And then you took it a step further to be a pilot. Was that something that you did because you enjoy flying, or was it, I need to know what it's like to manage the people that are sitting in this seat?
It makes me a better airport manager having worked. I think I counted, I've had 7 different jobs in aviation. And all of that, I think, does give me a perspective to understand when we're working on an approach issue to an airport. What's that pilot going to see? If we're
Okay.
working on a hangar, that. Now, I admit, when got out of the Marine Corps as an air traffic controller, I actually tried to get be an air traffic controller at the FAA. And I would have been happy probably being a career air traffic controller. And now today they're killing for air traffic controllers.
Right.
But when I got out of college and got out of the Marine Corps, they weren't hiring.
Hmm.
So I did not have that opportunity. So I was looking around going, well, what else do I want to do? And I enjoyed being an airport planner. I never really wanted to be an airline pilot, but I do love flying and I love
Hmm.
being a pilot. And when I worked for MoDOT as their aviation administrator, part of that was managing the corporate flight department. And so we had a Cessna 182, which is like a 4-seat high performance propeller aircraft. It's like I tell people it's like an F-250, where an F-150 is like a 172. An F-182's got a bigger engine. It's got better performance, variable pitch props. You can get into almost any airfield you need to. And then we also had a King Air 250. 350 actually, which is more of a corporate one where we flew around senior executives and the commissioners with
Hmm.
that. So I've always loved that part of aviation, but yeah, I'm not current right now. It's one of those where you either don't have the time or the money or either one. But I think being a pilot does make me a better airport manager. But yeah, I've been an air traffic controller, a line boy, a pilot, an airport planner, state aviation director, airport manager, and then an adjunct professor for UCM's aviation program. So it's 7 different jobs. Some would say I
Wow.
don't know what I want to do when I grow up, and I think that's a fair statement. I still don't know what I do when I grow up, but no, I've really enjoyed every avenue, and I think when I never say never to anything, and I'm always open to fresh ideas. And that's why, I think by the time this podcast comes out, they'll make a decision one way or another. But, I'm a finalist to be city manager now
Uh-huh.
for the city of Springfield. And the thought was, why not? I don't know. I guess my biggest fear is I don't want to be in my rocking chair when I'm 80 years old or 75 and going, why didn't you do something? Why didn't you do
Sure.
that? What were you afraid of? Yeah, every job makes you a little bit nervous. My 23-year-old daughter, I was talking to her last week, and she's my youngest, and she just graduated from college. And this is not a good time to graduate college. So she's
I know
trying to
it.
find her way in the
Yeah.
world and, everything that's out there. And she said something to me that I really think it struck me. She said, Dad, if you're putting in for a job and it doesn't terrify you at least a little bit, you're not challenging yourself enough.
Hmm.
I thought, what a profound words from a
Sure.
23-year-old.
The option to try different jobs as you work your way up, you can look at it, I guess, as like, well, this person doesn't know what they want to do. But there is a long-term benefit to that. And my kids hate that I relate every lesson to the firehouse, but it's very applicable in life. When you promote up, you are now managing the positions that you have done. And so you know what each person needs to do, what they're going through when they do it, ways, common problems. You're familiar with that job. And it only makes you a better leader if you have folks underneath you that you know exactly what they're supposed to do, and you can recognize quickly they're doing it right, they're doing it wrong, ways to improve it. It just lends itself to success when you're familiar with every aspect of your job and who you're leading.
I think you're very right, and also I think it's very important for them to see that you've been in the trenches.
Oh yeah.
You've cleaned the bathrooms, and you've
Hmm.
fueled the planes, and you've gone out and do different things like that. I think it's good family life. I mean, my kids were born in four different cities in three different states. My wife and I think, are on our seventh or eighth house right now. I've kind of lost track. It's kind of, and you talk about leaving. I remember when I left state government, and again, I was a division head within MoDOT, and both my parents retired from state government. And I remember my mom saying, Brian, what are you doing? You're crazy. You're a division head. That's the job, write it out. And I'm like,
Yeah.
Mom, I can't help it. I don't want to be bored and complacent in my job. And it's funny, since I've been down here for as long as I have, both of them have said, and unfortunately I lost my mom last year, but
Mm,
both have said, no, that was one of the best decisions you ever made. I
mm.
mean, and so it's hard. And I do think it's important. I've never left a job I didn't love, but sometimes challenging yourself and it's just something, I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I've always liked that new aspect, and challenging myself, and trying to show my kids that, and there's nothing wrong, because there are people that stay their whole life in one community and work for an organization, and that's admirable and that's good, and you get that longevity. And especially, I've talked to people, one thing I am jealous of is people that have all of their kids and all their grandkids like in their same city.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I'm ever going to have that, because my kids have inherited my wandering ways. And right now I have a kid in South Korea, one that works for Boeing, that's all over the place. And
Wow.
so who knows? I don't know. I don't know whether I somehow got that genetically from my parents, but I've always been kind of a wandering, open for anything. But with the exception of like Springfield, again, we've been here 15 years, and we love it here, and I think we'll be here for the foreseeable future.
The job that you do is very much you have a lot of irons in the fire at one time. Every given day, I've got to have all these meetings, and I have to talk to all these people, and I have to address all of these issues. Is that a fair statement?
Oh, definitely. I mean, and it's so many different partners. The airport is basically a small city, and we're
Yeah.
not the largest one out there, but we own 5 square miles of property,
Mm,
3,300 acres. And an airport can never have too much land,
right.
because it helps you to protect from incompatible development for growth down the road. But as far as, I'm lucky, I've got about 125 team members within my city team out here. So that's airfield maintenance, it's custodian, it's building maintenance, it's public relations, police, fire. We have our own police and fire department. Now we work with Springfield Police and Springfield Fire, but our firefighters are specialized to aircraft emergencies, and they also do the airline fueling. So if we have a building on fire, we call you guys
I
to
know.
come out and help us, on that. But then beyond that, we've got some 40 tenant businesses that are located at the airport. So that's your four different airlines. That's your restaurants, your car rental agencies, the military, they're a tenant, the FAA is an air traffic controller. We've got a flight school. We've got corporate flights departments. So on any given day, we have about 2,000 people that work at this airport. And, once a month, we have what we call our airline managers meeting, and we get all of our managers that have anything to do in the terminal side. So it's your station managers, it's your restaurant managers, and we all get together, and I try to have what's called like a safe zone. If we've had a particularly bad weekend, or some snow fight, or some issue that came up, we try to approach it from a standpoint of, hey, we're not pointing fingers at anybody, but let's debrief on these issues. And what I always try to emphasize on them is, it's not us versus them. If any part of the airport fails, we all fail.
Hmm.
So, even though I can't control an airline delay, what can we do to help each other out to give the best experience to our passengers? And I don't know that it's anything super special, but I do know airports where it's, well, that's their fault, and that's whatever. And I try not to have that kind of environment. And we've been pretty successful. In fact, last year, Newsweek, we were voted as one of the top 10 small airports of our class in the country, and went through a process. And I just take a lot of pride in that. And I'm not saying that it's anything Brian's done, but I think I try to promote a team where we support each other, we work together, we talk. I'm a fierce hater of silos within any organization, and trying to break those down and work towards a common goal. And we're growing like crazy. I mean, it's one thing to have 2, 3, 4% growth, but we've had year over year double-digit growth. I know when I started back in 11, we had about 650,000 passengers. This year, there's a very good chance we're going to break 1.5 million. Wow. So almost tripling of that size, and we've gone from, I think we had 7 destinations. Today we have 14 direct destinations. In airline service, we can talk about that. That's one of those things, where the public is never satisfied. And I don't blame them. I mean, they're always going to want, and I always joke to people when I'm out on the rubber chicken circuit doing the Satoma Club or the Optimist Club or Rotary, it's like, we know what you want. You want to be able to fly anywhere in the United States 3 times a day for 100 hours round trip. And it's like, yeah, I'm there. I get it.
Yeah.
But honestly, people are sometimes under the false assumption that airlines are like public utilities and they're there to serve the public. And it's like, you couldn't be further from the truth. Airlines have been deregulated since 78 when Congress deregulated. They're private companies beholden to their shareholders that are trying to make money wherever they can. And they have an incredibly mobile and expensive asset in an airliner. And a new airliner today, you're running anywhere between 150 and $200 million. So they're going to transfer that asset around and make money wherever they can, and the most money. And it's a brutal industry. I mean, I've learned a lot. And I always tell people, if you understand airline economics, you probably need to check yourself into a mental hospital, because they do so many things that don't make a lot of sense. But it is a brutal industry. I mean, we jokingly said 20 years ago, when you wanted to expand airline service, you get the chamber president and the mayor and the airport director and a couple business leaders, and you go around and knock on doors of airlines, with a couple bottles of Jack Daniels and hey, we want to expand service. Today, that could not be further from the truth. One, there's a lot less airlines today than there used to be. There used to be 20 plus airlines that had good sized networks to try to attract people. And you've known them all, the Braniffs, the US Air, all these ones that have been merged down to, really today, there are 4 airlines that manage or that have 85% of the seat capacity in the United States. American, Delta, United, and Allegiant. I'm sorry, American, Delta, United, Southwest. We have 3 of those 4 today already, because we have American, Delta, United, and Allegiant, although Allegiant's not one of those. So there's a lot less airliners out there today to make that case. And, the airline industry has been, one of the funniest quotes I've heard was from Warren Buffett, I think. And it was talking about probably few industries have lost more money than the airline industry. And I think Warren Buffett was quoted as something as saying, well, if the capitalist had been at the Kitty Hawk or at the Wright brothers, they would have shot down the plane, because so many people have lost money on that and just gone out of business and gone. And right now we're probably going into another period where it was, the pandemic was devastating to the airline industry. But, I remember, and I know, Tim, I'm just slipping all around here in all kinds of different areas, but I remember walking around in early April of 2020, right after they locked everything down, and going through the terminal, walking around, and I saw 1 or 2 custodians, an airline person, and I walked out in the parking lot, and there were 4 cars in the parking lot, and going, oh my gosh, I don't know. I've got 100 employees. How am I going to keep paychecks going? It was just a crazy time. There's just so much to talk about. But yeah, I don't even know what your original question was, but
no, it's fine. No, it's good information, because if somebody, and this isn't just someone who wants to work in the airline industry, there's leadership and management tidbits and kernels of knowledge that people can pull from conversations like this. And when you were talking, I was thinking about, you have all of these different irons in the fire. You have all these different people to manage. And I'm sure you, just like I and everybody listening, has worked for someone who was a micromanager, or someone who you weren't allowed to make a mistake, or they hired people to manage and then they didn't let them manage because the person over them was making all the decisions. How do you balance trusting the people that work for you to get the job done, while also not letting it go so far that you have to step in because they've made a big mistake? Like, where's that balance where I'm managing, but I'm not micromanaging? I'm trusting, but I'm monitoring.
I know I've gotten better, but I am still learning myself. I do know, like my first airport, I came in much more regulatory and more iron fisted, and you got to do this and you got to do that. And I think I've learned more in my career. Hire good people, trust them. You're right. No one wants to be micromanaged. And
Mhm.
also, I think part of being a manager is recognizing is just because somebody wants to do something a different way than how you would approach it doesn't make it bad. In fact, a lot of times you'll find that they're right and you're wrong if you give them a chance.
Yeah.
Now, when I was at MoDOT, I learned a lot about performance management. And it scared the heck out of me when I first learned about it. And then as I got more involved in it, I not only saw the results of it, but I've actually used that when I came to this airport, trying to put about a system in place to measure key indicators, and really as key indicators a way of measuring the results, not how you accomplish that. Because I'm a firm believer in the best ideas and the best people to deal with the issues are those that are closest to it. And so having a system to track those things and the performance is much more important as a senior manager than trying to get in the middle of exactly how they do it. That because that really ought to be on them. And um, it's empowering to people. But again, I'm still, I think, lifelong learning. And I think, honestly, the older I get, I think I realize the less I know. It is, you would probably be very surprised to know how little I'm involved in the day to day operation of this airport. I've got two outstanding deputy airport managers. I've got a supervisor team of about 15 people, of supervisors and managers, and we get together. And again, you hire the best people you can, and then you make sure that they have the resources and the backing. And also, I think part of it's the culture, a culture to try things. And this is something I've learned a lot working for boards. Myself and I mentioned the 11-member board I work for is, if you've got a board where, well, what did you do wrong? Why didn't this work out or done that? You're not going to go very far. And I jokingly tell my board that they're one of the reasons I'm here today is, if you start 10 ideas or have 10 things that you're going and two of them are successful, that's good. That's exciting. And we've been on kind of a roll where we will come up with the craziest things, but half of them work. And
Yeah.
that's what's kind of exciting. I mean, I think back to the flight school that, I came here in the first couple of years. I kept thinking, well, we're a good size airport. Why don't we have a flight school? And, like a lot of people, well, we gotta wait around for somebody to come who's going to build a hangar, buy a bunch of airplanes, hire some people, and finally it kind of dawned on me, this is ridiculous. And, once a year I sit down with my board in November with my management team, and we go away from the airport. We do some brainstorming for like a half day, and we try to set some stretch goals. And one of the things we had was, hey, we want to get a flight school for our area. And part of it was talking to, hey, we're waiting around for somebody to come and do this, build this, hire this, and wait. We're going to wait a long time. We're going to need to
Yeah.
incentive. We're going to need to incentivize this. And at that time, we had some vacant buildings, and so we started putting some tools in place. Like I took my maintenance guys who were very good at what they did, and we went in and remodeled an area for probably less than $50,000. And I kept talking to Ozark Technical Community College at the time. Hey, we'd love for you to start. And first it was, no, there's no way. Crazy. The attorneys, no, we don't want to do flight school. And we started working towards that. And it took about 8 or 9 no's. And then I come back and they'd address, we tried to address this issue. And I come back and say, hey, well, I got this one, Dr. Higdon. Well, the attorneys don't like that. And so we kept going back and forth, back and forth. And then finally in 2017, and I remember Dr. Higdon calling me and saying, okay, Brian, we're going to do this, but we're in it for 5 years. We're going to start with 20 slots, 3 training aircraft. We've got a third party flight school provider that's going to do it for us. But, if it takes 5 years to get started, that's fine. We're in it. We're going to do it. And by golly, if we didn't, the program started with a waiting list.
Oh, wow.
So, and today it's grown from 3 training aircraft and 20 students to over 10 training aircraft, including multi-engine, and they have almost 100 students.
Wow.
And it's just grown exponentially. And it's funny, we were 2 years into that program, and I knew they were doing well. And I was like, guys, this is only going to get bigger. Why don't we get some people in the room? Let's get a consultant. Let's do some visioning on what the future might look like. Because the last thing I want to have as the airport manager is I don't have enough room for you to grow. And we were working on our master plan at that time, and I wanted to make sure we designated areas for an aviation educational institution. And so we did that. And we all threw in a little bit of money. We brought a consultant on board. We did some visioning. And it was kind of an afterthought. But we were talking, it's like, hey, down the road, let's stick a facility in there, just a box, we'll call it, for an aircraft maintenance training program, like a mechanic training program.
Mm-hmm.
Because just as bad as we need pilots, we need mechanics. And we thought, surely 15, 20 years down the road, something like that'll happen if we start planning for it. But I keep also saying time and time again, if you have a vision and don't worry about how something's going to get done, it's amazing how it comes together. So fast forward to today, and I'm literally looking across the airfield and I see a brand new 30,000 square foot, fully paid for aircraft mechanic and training program that was just approved, the program by FAA a couple months ago. And they will be starting fall of 2025 training airline mechanics.
Wow.
I mean, it's that kind of stuff. I love the economic development part, and I love working with young people trying to get into aviation. And we can talk more. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the word vision. I heard you say that 2 or 3 times while you were explaining that growth. And this is my opinion, and this is a rabbit hole. I'll just warn you now. I think that's one thing that our country used to do better than just about anybody, was to dream really big and go, no, we've set our sights 10 feet in front of us when we need to set it 150 feet in front of us. We need to think bigger, long term. It never hurts to ask. It never hurts to try. And let's come up with an idea that almost seems, if it makes you a little uncomfortable, like your daughter said,
yeah,
maybe we should. I mean, why should we just go, well, yeah, what does it hurt? And I think sometimes we get in a rut and it's just like, well, this is the way we've always done it. That's madness. You don't talk like that. We don't dream big. We just come here, collect a paycheck, and do what we want to do. But I think it's kind of exciting. You've got people like, Elon Musk is a very polarizing figure, but he's one of those guys that says, why aren't we planning to go to Mars? I mean, who says that? But he's actually making steps that we may actually, in our lifetime, maybe not, have somebody or something on another planet.
I couldn't agree more. And, I mentioned earlier about my board, having an environment with the board that when you do fail, and you always fail, and failure is actually, if you hear from people, it's a major step towards success.
Yeah.
But when you do have that thing that doesn't quite work out, instead of, well, what did you do wrong? And oh my gosh, we got to get people in trouble and hold people accountable. Instead, he's like, what have we learned from this, and what can we do better next time?
Yeah.
And another, if you want me to, I'll tell you another quick story about a thing that really came together really well here at the airport recently, and that is a new American Airlines maintenance base. And for years, American's our largest carrier. And for years, they were doing a small maintenance operation out of a leased hangar over in the general aviation area. And these are the old Embraer 140 and 145 aircraft and the old Saab 340s, which are, anywhere from 19 to 40 seat aircraft. And the industry is moving away from those for good reason. They're not economical. The pilot's salary, you can't afford to pay, 6-figure salaries to pilots that are flying around 40 people. Economically, it just doesn't work. And so my first several years when they were running maintenance out of a leased hangar over there, the handwriting was on the wall. We were going to lose them as a maintenance base and the jobs that they had unless we did something differently. So we'd been talking with American about, hey, let's get you into a bigger facility. One that, as they bring in the larger airplanes, will hold that, create more jobs for the area. And long story short, and I think it took almost 7 years to to finally get to the point when and it's funny, it never starts out also it never finishes the way you intended it to start. I wanted to just lease them a parcel of property and let them come in and build a facility. They didn't want to do that. So the way it worked out is we end up designing it, building it, managing that, and actually the city owns it, and then we lease it to American. But today, or actually back, we did it during the pandemic, but in December of 2021, we moved them into a 65,000 square foot, 3-bay Embraer 175 maintenance base. And so these are the larger 76 seat, 80 seat regional jets, and even they run some mainline routes for the airlines today. And the thing about air service, which I talked about earlier, where no one's ever happy, they always want more. Airlines, and there are communities that will literally write a check to an airline to provide service. Our board doesn't do that. Either a route's got to stand on its own and be self-sufficient, or we don't really want you. But there are ways you can incentivize airlines to do service. And the thought was, with an airline maintenance base, and why we did this project and why I worked with the council, and they were very open to the idea, and my board, is we want to create those jobs. We want to have those opportunities for the kids. And actually the OTC aircraft mechanic training program was a major part of them agreeing to do this, which is now coming to fruition. But also having an airline maintenance base here gives the airlines another reason to come to Springfield, because they got to maintain those planes here, other than just selling tickets. So by supporting them and working with them, that project has worked out really since 2021, when they opened up that base, and they're maintaining their aircraft here. In fact, us and Miami are the only two Embraer 175 maintenance bases in American Airlines inventory. So we're the main ones. So they'll cycle planes through all the time. The number of seats in our market put in by American Airlines has increased 30% since 2021. And so when we did the last master plan, we identified 2 additional what are called maintenance, repair, and overhaul facilities, or MRO. And there's a lot of acronyms in aviation, but we've got 2 additional MRO spaces. So the goal is, when OTC, or Ozark Tech, comes online with their aircraft mechanic training program, and we're going to start pumping out these mechanics. It's a 2-year program. You're going to graduate in 2 years. Workforce is huge. In fact, and that's why, I'm excited about our community. Ozark Tech starts the Center for Advanced Manufacturing. We're focusing a lot more on industrial development, all the partnerships with MSU, with Evangel, with Drury. I think that's something Springfield does really good, is that connection between what does industry need and what our educational institutions need to do to train students to meet that need. So what's really exciting to me is, for the airport going forward, we've got spots for expansion for maintenance facilities, and we've got a pipeline of training right here at the airport. So if we could get Delta or United or Allegiant or any other airline to come here and put a maintenance facility here, they're also going to provide airline service. So the community is going to get a little more of what they want. They're going to want more airline service, and the more airline service we can bring, it's also going to bring more competition, and competition is what's bring down prices. In my people are always like, I go to Kansas City, it's $30, $40 cheaper a ticket, or whatever amount of ticket. It's not because they say, Springfield's doing something wrong. It's because competition. At the larger carriers, or at the larger facilities, you got more competition. That's what drives prices down. Airlines are free to charge whatever they want to charge, and they will charge whatever the market will bear. So in our area, because we're somewhat geographically isolated, and they know that, although it's not as bad as it used to be, our fares have come down. But the more competition we can bring, I'd love to be a regional hub for airline maintenance, and that'll also give us better airline service to serve the region. But this year alone, I mentioned about how fast we're growing. We've had back-to-back record years in 23 and 24. In 25, we're actually starting to see the industry level off and plateau. I've talked to several airport directors, and I'm sure we'll get into industry, other issues, but many airports are leveling off. I literally just got our April numbers yesterday, and we are right now, in April, we were up 10%. So we're running 9% ahead of last year's record year on top of that. And I think a lot of it is our community. We got a diversified economy. We're the fastest growing metropolitan area in the state, and we're a reflection of that. I mean, the airport, people are like, hey, the airport's growing like crazy. Good job, Brian. And it's like, I hear you, but you got to be really, really, really careful taking credit for something that you don't always have a hand in. The airport is a barometer. We're a reflection of local economy. When people have money in their pocket and they want to fly, they'll go fly. If they don't, or there's uncertainty, they won't fly. So there are plenty of really good airports out there that are not doing well and have plateaued and even lost service. And they've got really good airport directors. So I'm always really careful about claiming credit for something, because that stuff will come back and haunt you.
You had mentioned something a minute ago, and I just wanted to give OTC. I'm not affiliated with them. I don't know any of their leadership. I just know the things that I've seen in my time in Springfield. OTC is growing, and they seem to be doing a lot of things right as far as their training offerings, the classes. The buildings that they're building are not just a monument to a donor. Like, it's an actual effective facility where people can leave with skills to then go earn a good living. And I really like what I'm seeing out of OTC.
The pilot program, I jokingly said, was no, maybe yes. And the aircraft mechanic program was maybe yes. I mean, their responsiveness with that. And then one thing I haven't talked about, and this was something the local, you go even earlier than that, the Springfield Public School System, the largest school system in the state of Missouri. When they hired Dr. Granita Lathan, I think it's been 4 years ago, she came up from Houston, Texas. And with her came some really cool ideas. She heard about the Ozark Tech Aviation program, and it was her idea, not mine. She's like, hey, can we get this earlier? So she brought forth the idea of starting an aviation high school, and she pulled it off. Now, we cooperated with that, but she cooperated with Ozark Tech. So we now have the first aviation high school in the state of Missouri, and they're in their third year, where they take 10 students. It's done through an application and a lottery system. You have to apply for it, but it's a very competitive. They'll typically have 70, 80, 90 people apply for 10 slots.
Wow.
But these kids come out, spend half a day, their junior and senior years, and they graduate with a pilot's license at no cost to them. And that's been really, really fun being involved in that program. And I helped them to develop the curriculum. And one thing I was adamant about, and again, it's funny how many people, everybody starts in this industry. Oh, I want to be a pilot. I want to be a pilot. That's all I want. And how many people, they don't realize how many other jobs are in it. So one thing I claim a little bit of credit for, I worked with them on the junior curriculum for their first semester. They don't go flying. They spend the first semester going around all parts of the airport. So we have them spend days with the control tower, with the military aviation, with our corporate flight departments, with my airfield maintenance people, with the National Weather Service, with the airline people doing ground handling. Probably the most boring part of that first curriculum is I get them for a day on airport governance. I joke because it's not really that sexy.
Yeah, I know.
But the idea is to expose them. Hey, kids, it's not just being a pilot, and you can still be a pilot, and I'm a pilot, and I love being a pilot.
Sure.
But there are so many opportunities. Our air traffic controllers, and you've heard it in the media now. They're covering it like crazy. We're a training tower in our airspace here. People think, oh, it's nice, that little tower there controls space like 10 miles around. No, that control tower runs Springfield approach. They also run Mizzou approach, which has airspace all the way up to Hannibal, all from Springfield. And they've got probably 50, 60 controllers and maintenance people that are over there. And it usually takes you to be an air traffic controller. You go through an academy, or you're a prior military, or there's other various college programs you can go to. But when you go to an airport like here, it'll probably take you a year to get checked out in the various positions that are both in the tower cab, but then below the tower cab, they have the radar room. And that's what I did in the military, was the radar stuff. I did get ground control on the tower. But anyway, you're towards the end of what's called full performance level. When you're a full performance level controller and you can run all those positions, I guarantee there's not one control over there makes less than six figures.
Wow.
So, there's some good jobs that are out there. Our corporate flight departments, when I came here years ago, most of the corporate pilots were laid off airline pilots. Well, aviation and really most industries are very cyclical. And, we're going through periods where we have a huge demand for pilots. A lot of schools are pumping out pilots now. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's going to back off a little bit in the coming years, is, the ups and downs and ebbs and flows. But one thing's for sure, really, no matter where you are in aviation, we need more young people going into it. And to this day, that's probably one of the things I really enjoy the most. I love working on big economic development projects. I just enjoy that. And then I love working with young people interested in aviation. And I've actually got a girl who actually just got her master's degree. She called me up like 6, 7, 8 years ago. She was a high school student up around Stockton Lake. And I think it was her mom called me and said, "Hey, can my daughter Angela come down and be a job shadow for you one day?" And she came down, and then she came back the next year and did a job shadow. And we were talking more. Anyway, she came and worked for Allegiant. She was slinging bags and doing different things. She went to OTC, got her undergraduate degree, was working in various aviation roles, kind of working her way up. And then we hired her in our operations center, which allowed her to tap into the city's tuition reimbursement program. So she ended up getting her bachelor's in aviation management, and then now she's picked up her and every time she's gotten a degree that we've helped pay for, I make her go in front of my board when we give her diploma. And I jokingly tell the board, but I'm dead serious about this. She's going to be the director of this airport someday. And she's like, "Oh no," aim high. The most limiting person on these people are yourself. And I get such a charge out of working. And I always get to meet with the high school students, and usually Ozark Tech has me over talking to their early class. I just love working with young people wanting to get in aviation.
A minute ago, you were talking about how when you have the students come, everybody wants to be a pilot, and they're looking for the edgy, cool, sexy job of, well, I'm a pilot, and as they slowly remove their sunglasses.
Yeah.
But your idea there about making them come to and see all of the different departments that allow the airport to function. You mentioned earlier in our conversation that you hate businesses or entities that are siloed. Well, that can apply to your mind as well. If you're just like, well, I'm a pilot, and you don't have any idea what goes into working on your plane or fueling your plane or any other maintenance or certifications or, how the runway is maintained. It's so vital to know all those different areas because it's going to make you a better pilot.
Definitely.
You mentioned something earlier about failing, and I always ask this question because I'm curious what would they say, or what would they advise someone that worked for them that made a mistake, or how you handle with failure yourself. Now, I don't think my dad came up with this little acronym, but he told me when I was younger, he said, FAIL is just an acronym for first attempt in learning. And I've always thought that was just a phenomenal way to frame a failure. Yeah, there's going to be consequences sometimes. And depending on the mistake, it could be, pretty major. But it's also, you're going to make mistakes. And I think some people expect perfection. And it's just, there's few certain things in life except death and taxes. You will not be perfect. You will make a mistake. How you respond to it.
If you're not making mistakes,
yeah,
you're not pushing yourself.
Right. But what's your advice for dealing with failure? If somebody that works for you makes a mistake, how do you proceed forward? How do you address it? And then what's your approach after the fact?
Oh, I mean, pretty much just like you said, that it's part of that. You're not pushing yourself if you're not, hitting it from all sides. I always jokingly, and I've had everything under the sun at the airport. Somebody taking a backhoe underneath the jet bridge and clipping some wires, somebody going off into a ditch, or and it's just one of those where. And I'm not saying you always have a focus on safety, and you always have a focus on training and doing different things. But, honestly, when there's like a mistake or something, some good hearted ribbing is probably part of the deal, but, just moving on. Now, I always jokingly say you got one boo-boo pass, and it's like my kids, having 4 kids. I always tell people, yeah, I've had 4 kids through driving. And every kid, whether you like or not, is going to have a boo-boo. You can overreact. They're going to, that concrete post jumped out in front of me. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's stuck. It's right there.
Right.
But you got to move on, because if you just keep remembering that, you break down their self-esteem, their confidence, which you can't have that. So, you quickly identify it, quickly talk about what we could have done better, razz them a little bit, but then move on
Sure.
and don't keep bringing it up because that's just not a good thing. And celebrate your failures. My deputy, who I get, he's like me, but 20 years younger. He runs the operation. I borrowed his truck a couple of weeks ago. I forget, he was on vacation or something. And I was out checking projects on the airfield. And I don't mind saying this. I pulled up we were rebuilding our cargo apron, and I pulled up in front of some ramps, but the ramps were very low. And I went out, I was talking to the construction foreman and going around all the different areas and got sucked into that and didn't come back for an hour later. So I jump in the truck and put it in drive and I go forward. And, sure enough, those ramps that I parked in front of that I couldn't see, and I moved forward and I had a boo-boo, and I thought, oh, great. When I called up, fessed up about it, and he knew it, and he gave me some razz, and I said, you know what, I deserve it. I don't know. I just think mistakes are a part of life. You always try to limit as much as you can, but I think overreacting to an honest mistake is a key management failure, in my opinion. It doesn't create an environment that you want. And I talked earlier about performance management and the idea of how we do it at the airport. When we did this program a number of years ago, is we got together about once every 6 months and we reported on the findings of the particular areas, and every measure was tied to an individual. So that individual had to stand up in front of a group of his peers or her peers and talk about what was going on with that measure. And you weren't allowed to talk about what you're going to do because results only matter on what you've done. But I was surprised at the level of accountability the coworkers held that person to. They were much tougher than I was. And you have that. So you want to have that culture where we challenge each other, but we're working together and you're helping each other out. But no, I don't know. Again, I'm no expert in this area. I've picked up a few things. I've worked for a lot of really good bosses in my career and some mentors that really helped shape me. And then I've worked for some ones that are not so good. And even those, I probably learned some things from, not all good, but maybe how not to do things. And I think all that's part of making you a better manager. But, at the end, I think most people would agree is hire good people. And I will say hiring is a big deal. I would 10 times rather have somebody who's got a good attitude, who's coachable, learnable, and can work in a team environment than some prima donna that thinks they're God's gift to technology and they know everything under the sun. And I tell my supervisors that all the time, run from that person. I don't want them on our team. And they've grown and learned from that. It's, working together in a team is the soft skill thing that I think it's still there. I see the young people and I'm, every generation thinks the generation that follows, it's going to, everything's going down. Every once in a while I joke and say, it's all that damn rock and roll music. It's just, but when I work with the young people, I get excited because I know they've got great hearts. They want to do good, in there. You need to give them an opportunity, and you got to give them room to fail. Yeah. Because you're right. You can't, if you solve everything for them or tell them what to do, they're never going to learn.
Well, they also won't make their own decisions. If you do everything for them, then what you get is you're going to wonder, why isn't anybody doing anything? Nobody takes any initiative. Well, I'm either going to get in trouble for doing something that you didn't authorize, or, I'll do it wrong and then I'll get in trouble, or I'll make a mistake and I'll get in trouble. But every outlet or every ending story for me is negative. And so I'm just going to do as little as possible to not get fired.
Yeah, that's not a good thing.
No. The prima donna thing, you're absolutely right. When you have someone that comes in and they're teachable and they have a good attitude and they're upbeat, they show up, they have the soft skills to show up on time or 5 minutes early, because if you're on time, you're late as far as I'm concerned. Then those folks, if they make a mistake, it's a genuine mistake and they're going to learn from it and most likely never repeat it again. The prima donnas will be the ones that will blame and deflect and not take responsibility or learn from it.
The other big thing to get in this industry, if I could, is relationships are everything. Yeah. And they matter. And, if somebody's interested in the career field in this, call up your local airport manager. I have people call me all the time,
Oh, really?
and I love meeting. And I got to be careful. I can't take a whole day once a week or whatever.
Yeah.
But no, I regularly, in fact, Warrensburg, they have an aviation program up there, University of Central Missouri's aviation program. And if somebody's interested in aviation, I usually have them down as a group, and then I'll go up and guest lecture. But the idea, and I remember when I was fresh out of the Marine Corps and had my undergraduate, I called up and went over and visited the Jeff City. And I think this is true of most industries. If you get a call from a young person and they want to know what you do or how to do it, I would have very little feeling about anybody that would turn some of that down.
Oh,
People
yeah.
are always willing to help. They're always
Sure.
willing to give advice, but you got to make the first move, and if you're not willing to stick yourself out there a little bit, make those contacts, because, today I know you got Indeed, you got these job listings and things like that, but very few people in the industry that if you won't reach out to them won't respond in a positive fashion if they can.
Yeah. No, you're right. It's just with anything in life. You can't just sit there waiting for a knock on the door. You've got to go and take that first step and show the initiative. It's amazing nowadays. Unfortunately, there's a lot of folks that won't take that first step. And so if you're willing to do that, you're already leaps and bounds ahead of the competition.
Yes.
The soft skills, you kind of opened the door a minute ago with folks that reach out to you, and you've mentioned folks you thought would be good in your line of work. We've talked about a number of different management styles and approaches to failure and whatnot, but are there any soft skills that if you had a group of, 5 or 10 people in front of you, what are those little intangibles that pop out at you that would allow someone, I think that guy's got what it takes?
I mean, I think a lot of it's common sense, but I've definitely picked up some nuggets in hiring people and through the years and so forth. Someone that has a genuine interest in the job, if you're interested in something, you go into an interview, research, ask some questions. I think horrible when you finish an interview, you say, do you have any questions? And they say no. Right. Or the question relates to, well, how many vacation days do I get per year? And what's my salary? And everyone negotiate. And it's like, dude, you never talk that stuff on the first interview.
Right.
Let them want you before you do any of that. But just teachable, excitement about the job, interest, getting, I think when I've gone in interviews, if you can get the panel to talk more, ask them questions. Hey, I noticed on this last quarterly statement you were up 3% in this area. Hey, can you get a little more? And that sounds pretty cool, or something along those lines. Getting people, it shouldn't all be just about you. And seeing people that are not so self-centered, people that are wanting to be supportive of the team. Those are things that I look for. And just have a decent personality.
Are you looking for folks that you're looking to invest in an employee? Are you looking for employees that are wanting to invest in your company or your operation?
I mean, people that come in like with good ideas and are, and it's funny. I always tell my managers there are two basic kind of, there's the person that you almost have to hold back. I mean, they are so excited. They're wanting to get in and do 3-4 things. They got these great ideas. And probably half of them are like, well, I don't know. Would you rather have that, or would you rather have kind of the old dog person? He's sitting over there in the corner, and you got to go over there and you kind of got to kick him. And it's like, hey, man, let's move along here a little bit. And they'll get up and they'll do what needs to be done. And then they'll go back down to their position. I would 10 times rather have that person that I got to hold back, who every once in a while is going to make a mistake or maybe need some corrective discussion, than the person I got to kick a little bit. I mean, it's just the initiative part that is not good.
What do you like most about your job? If you could just pick one thing.
Oh gosh. I mean, and it's probably the reason I like the sweet spot of this size of airport. When you go to the next level, and I'll be straight with you, I've had the opportunity. It's almost part of such a large cosm that what I like about this is I can go around to any part of this airport and I can see my hand in this and that and where I contributed. And that is appealing to me. I really like getting things done. I mean, I have no interest in occupying a chair. It's if we're not getting things done and we're not moving forward, it's what's the fun in it? You know?
Yeah. Is there an aspect of your job that you dislike? And every job has good days and bad
Oh yeah.
days.
Oh
I
yeah.
love my job, but there are a few things that if I didn't
Oh
have to do every day, it would be nice to dismiss.
yeah. No doubt about it. And probably I would say one of the more challenging. I don't necessarily hate it. It's not a bad thing, but it is difficult being held accountable to the public for an industry that you would be surprised how little say so I have.
Hmm.
And we're a good size regional airport. We're probably in my lifetime never going to be an international airport, or a major hub. So as a result, a lot of we don't have a lot of throughput traffic. You don't go from LA to New York with a stop in Springfield. It doesn't happen. I mean,
Mhm.
so we're what's called an origin and destination airport. So you're either coming to the Springfield for a specific reason or you're leaving Springfield for a specific region. So a lot of our airlines, and again, they're good people, but they a lot of times they're like any industry, they're trying to keep their costs as low as possible. So but we've got United and American are our busiest airlines right now, but like United is handled by a private third party company called Unify, and actually Unify is doing really good today. But an American is handled by American people, and Allegiant as another third party. Well, a lot of times those are low cost contracts. So, like, let's say United and Delta, and they got flights hitting every 15 minutes, at 12, 12:15, 12:30, 12:45, 1 o'clock. And you've got crews that if everything falls in place, they're good. But welcome to reality. It doesn't happen. So one flight's going to be 5 minutes early, another one's going to be 10 minutes late.
Yeah.
And people just assume, oh, well, the airport handles all that. You need to hire more people. And it's like, that crew. And so people will come out here on an airplane and they'll sit there and they'll wait sometimes for 10 minutes because, well, the crew that's scheduled to park you, they're now doing baggage on a plane over there and doing that. So you get a lot of people that, expect perfection in an imperfect industry. And you got people that are working very hard. So a lot of time, and you don't want to, you know, you want to listen to them. I mean, every piece of input I get, and I get every input under the sun, from cold sandwich to late bag to dirty restroom to, you name it. I mean, but I consider those as opportunities to get better.
Hmm.
So people will call with any complaint under the sun. And I always start out every input session with thank you for taking the time to help us get better. And I do truly mean that. But we do have bad days, and there'll be a weather day or word delays or other system. And you're dealing with people that are not, they're trying to get to a funeral of a parent. They're trying to get to a wedding. They're trying to go on a honeymoon where, unfortunately, they're booking a cruise where they're flying into Fort Lauderdale at 10 o'clock and the cruise leaves at 1 o'clock. Well, first of all, you never fly in on the day of your cruise.
No.
Come in the day before. Part of it is, or they got 45 minutes on a layover in Charlotte, which is heavily under construction right now. And it's like, oh, for God, just use some common sense.
Yeah.
You got to be a little, but you're dealing with people who are emotionally not at the best. So you get a little bit of a thick skin where you get used to being chewed out. And so some of those days aren't the best. I will admit.
I'm sure there's times where the complaints are legitimate, but I can also see the majority of the time it's probably people that are just being difficult, and all that's putting it politically correctly.
If you let them vent and talk, honestly, that usually they're happy. But I do have a legitimate job in that if there are distinct patterns with a particular issue, I have a duty and I will step in, and we've done that. So I definitely look for the patterns. And the airport fails plenty of times too, So even with my tenants, it's not always the airline fault. Sometimes it's us. It's like, okay, what have we learned? What can we do better? And that kind of atmosphere is what I seek to try to have here in culture, that I seek to have here at SGF.
One of the things that popped into my head as I was listening to you talk about the a plane is early, a plane is late. This crew that normally does this got pulled over here to do this because of a change in the schedule. So then they can't do that. And the end customer doesn't understand. All they know is
They don't know.
something's gone wrong. This may be something that you don't have any control over for the standpoint of the major airlines that are flying in. But what can be done, if anything, to maybe give the customer some insight into this is what we're dealing with? And it may not make them
Yeah.
understand it more, but is that not worth the time?
No, it is. It is a balance because you don't want to appear to be, well, it's never my fault,
Oh
because
yeah. Okay.
sometimes it is my fault. But I do think we have put out several long posts and explanations on our website about what is the responsibility. But at the end result is you're dealing with somebody that's either missing a flight, they're delayed, they want to get to their loved ones, and they don't really care. They
Yeah.
just want it done.
Right.
And so, and I've had a few pilots, and God loves the ego of an airline captain, and a couple times, I've only really got into them once. I was going to say maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I won't even name the airline, but it was a particularly bad weather day, and all my crews are out doing runways and taxiways with the snow plows and doing all that, and this person was having delayed getting de-iced. And the plane pushes back, it gets the ice, and he's coming in, and the time expired, so he had to come back in, offload the plane, and of course the captain loves to grab a mic and just throw everybody under the bus, and he's sitting there just breaking the airport through the coals on not having enough de-icing crew, and I'm never going to challenge them in a public setting like that because that does no good. But then
Sure.
I'm like, when he gets all done, and I'm like, pulled him aside and say, hey, Captain, can I talk to you for a minute? It's like, okay, you do realize the airport's focused on the runways and taxiways and keeping those, and you had a breaking action of good. Should you be allowed to take off, and the taxiway is cleared going to that? And the reason that your plane is not being de-iced is because your airline that handles the de-icing for your aircraft, they have two of them. One broke down because they didn't get it fixed. So my point is, be careful who you point the finger at, because it may be yourself in the mirror.
Yeah.
And by you doing this, what kind of culture are you doing? And oh my gosh, and again, it's just more of, again, I'm never going to say we're not perfect because we fail all the time, but it's just that trying to balance, because there are in the airline industry. I mean, when during the pandemic, the airlines were terrified, and they were giving retirement incentives to get rid of people. They were laying people off. And the travel demand that came out of the pandemic was so much higher than anybody expected. The demand was huge. And all of a sudden, and the pilots that were now retired, and they're like, well, I don't want to come back. I like it where I'm at. And there wasn't enough pilots being trained. And so there was these distinct shortages, and the pilot salaries just shot up huge. So we as an industry, after the pandemic, were not prepared for the level of demand that were imposed upon that. And so things are now calming down, now more plateauing, and we're getting back to more, but we're still experiencing strong growth here. But that's why I love this industry. It's ever dynamically changing. I'm still learning a lot, and I love that aspect of it.
The topic of pay is something that most folks are always interested in. And I know that we talked earlier about that's not, your first question at your first interview was, well, how much does it pay kind of stuff. But on the Jobs podcast, we do like to at least touch maybe the edge of pay scale. Now, I'm not asking you what you make. I never do that. But industry standard, you've had a lot of different jobs, and now you are a director. What kind of salary ranges, or does it vary a lot, like a lot of things do, with someone that's at LAX or LaGuardia is going to have a higher cost of living, so their salary will reflect that?
Sure.
But we're in the Midwest, so what are we looking at?
No, that's a good question. Really, it probably has more to do with the size of airports. So we're what's categorized as a small hub airport.
Okay.
And then there are medium hubs and large hubs. So Springfield, Northwest Arkansas, Eugene, Oregon, Chattanooga, Tennessee, those are all small hubs. Medium hubs are like Kansas City, St. Louis, Little Rock. Those are medium hub. Large hubs, those are your Chicagos, your Atlantas, your Dallas. And then there are non-hub airports, which are still important. Those are like Joplin, Columbia, Cape Girardeau, those, just to kind of give you an idea
Mm-hmm.
of that. So, and it varies a lot. I will say the number of experienced airport managers in my field now is scary. We have a lot of people at my age and older that are retiring off, and we do not have a really good large crop of competition. So there is. I mean, my two deputies get recruited constantly. Get recruited from time to time. I lost my one of my assistant directors a few years ago, and it's funny. She had no airport experience. I hired her out here, great financial experience, and I worked with her for 6-7 years, and she got all her accreditations and did that. And she was a really qualified chief financial officer for an airport. And I remember joking to her one day, going, "Do you have any idea how marketable you are right now?" Sure enough, within like 2 months, she got stolen away by Nashville to be their number 2 or 3 in their finance areas. So it is scary. I mean, I was actually talking to one of my younger daughter about, man, you should go into airport management. And this is a field where it's wide open. It's not a bunch of old white guys. I mean, actually, the director of Kansas City, I've known her for years. Younger person, she's a female. The long-term director at Lambert, Rhonda, her and I grew up in the industry together. She came from an airline background. But I would say, small hub airports, us, Des Moines, when you get to the director level, it's good pay. I mean, you're probably somewhere between 150 and 300 a
Okay.
year. You go to medium hub and larger, especially at airport authorities, which are governing bodies within themselves, and large hubs. That next class, you're 300 to 600. But now somebody that's like the airport manager of like Joplin or Columbia or some, there's still good pay to be made in that. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, anywhere from 75 to 150.
Okay.
A lot of times you're part of a city, so sometimes you're held back on that because they're a department head within a city. There are many ways that airports are governed. Again, some are governing bodies within themselves. They're known as what's called an airport authority. So wide variety of that, but I will say that the pays just in the last several years have gone up dramatically just because there is not enough people going into this area. So if you have a kid that's interested in going in aviation management and they've got the right attitude, you can't be quiet and timid in this role. You got to be somebody that rolls up their sleeve, gets in there. But if you have that kind of mentality, good personality, you can be incredibly compensated and have a very good career.
Are most of the folks that are in your line of work more on the extroverted side, or is there a typical personality style you see?
No, it's almost we're
Okay.
all type A's,
Oh yeah.
extroverts. I mean, that's because you to be at this level, you have to be.
Yeah.
You're not going to be timid and be a small or medium hub airport director. I
Hmm.
mean, you can't because first of all, you'll never survive in that role. There's too many negotiations. There's too much working. You've got to be able to roll your sleeves up and get in there, or you don't have a prayer. I mean,
Hmm.
it's not for everybody. Now, you can also have a very successful career, though. And I always tell people there are 2 different ways to get in airport management. You can go ahead and get your degree. I mean, it used to be, well, I was prior military or I was an airline pilot, also my mechanical. Most professional airport managers today went to school in one of the programs out there to be an airport manager. So when you graduate and you got your bachelor's degree and you know enough to be dangerous, really 2 schools of thought. You're either going to go to a large airport and you're going to start in as like an operations officer or maintenance officer, or you're going to go in there and learn that aspect and hopefully grow and work your way up. And many airport directors have done that. You got to be careful though in that area not to stay your whole career in operations. So, you need to do a little over in air service development, over in maintenance. You got to have that wide perspective. Or the other approach is you go to a small airport and you're the top dog. I mean, I've never been in an airport that I've not been the director of aviation, including my first one up in St. Joe. And so I was literally scraping dead birds off the runway in the morning, and I was going to city council meeting that night trying to get a $100,000 match for a runway rehabilitation grant. And so it's kind of sink or swim. You get in there and you learn everything because you have no choice. And if the custodian's sick, you're scrubbing the bathrooms in the FBO because you got to. Now I prefer that way, honestly, because it's really put me in situations where I had to learn and, sink or swim. And I loved it. But I see people are different in OA, but you can also have a very successful career and never be the top position. Yeah. There are plenty of really good people and who do very well in those roles. Because you go up to like KCI or Lambert, they probably have 400 to 500 employees who work for their cities at the airport. And then, like my airport, I got 125 people. But like within those that have gone and been a professional airport management training, like my deputy, Dave Schomburg, good guy. You should have him on there. He actually started his ops in Kansas City, became assistant operation manager. He knew he needed to move around, and sometimes that means leaving a good job to get that exposure. So he went down and ran an airport in Denton, Texas, a good corporate general aviation airport. He went to College of the Ozarks, got an aviation degree there. Unfortunately, they don't have that program. So when he put in for my job, when he put in for the deputy, and I hired him 8 years ago, I saw he had big airport experience. I saw he'd run a corporate, an airport that was a general aviation airport. I'm like, good, he's got that perspective. I look for, and he also worked line service, and he was a pilot, and also he was a mechanic. So he had that well-rounded, varied background where it made him a really good candidate, and he's done an awesome job. And actually within our trade association, he's grown up highly too.
What you just mentioned there about the varied experience, is that something that pretty much everybody in your industry, you're not going to be able to just buy a house and plant down roots and stay here. You probably need to accept the fact that in order to get to the top, you're going to have to move around a number of times before you finally settle.
A good friend of mine is the director of the Tampa St. Pete Airport, Tom Dewsbury. Great guy. Him and I actually both went to Embry-Riddle at the same time, both graduated, same class back in '88. And he went to Tampa St. Pete Airport and started as a basic ops guy. Today, he's the director of that airport. He spent his entire career at that airport. I mean, he knows every single thing about that airport. I moved around. I've been at 5 different airports. And I don't think one's right or wrong. So you have examples, but I will tell you, most of the people that I've seen have moved around somewhat, so I think there's no hard, fast rule, but I know when I look for people to put into senior positions, I like to see that variety of perspectives, working under a variety of governances, working under a variety of issues, and being successful in those issues. Because there's no exact playbook for any. I mean, if you see the old adage in the industry is, you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport. We're all different, and everyone's a different approach to that. So I look in things I look for if I can, but also I've promoted up. My airport operations manager, Chuck Cowan, awesome guy. He started as a firefighter over in the ARF area. He had done that, became a trainer, became the ARF chief, and then we promoted him up that. I've got people, and the guy prior to him was a fueler, went over, became an ARF, and I say ARF, that's Aircraft Rescue and Firefighter. Right. They're the fire guys for the airport. So, and I think I do, Dave and I have joked about this. It's people like him and I will come and go at airports in senior management positions, but every airport does need that person who's been there forever, who has that institutional knowledge, and knows where the bodies are buried. I jokingly say that, and knows all the issues. And for us, that guy's Chuck. He's been here 20 plus years, and he's got a guy below him, Eric, who I would trust those guys with my life. They really handle the majority of the operational decisions at the airport. I get very involved in going after that main project, going to meet with that airline, working with our congressional delegation, working with board members on something, working with the mayor or the council. That's more my role. And then the relationship with the business community out in the community.
Those guys that have that intimate knowledge of every single aspect of your building. That's the one you find that switch in the basement that nobody knows what it does. And it's like, well, don't flick it. It may turn the oxygen off or something, you know?
And I tell you, if there's an accident or if there's an emergency at the airport,
yeah,
or if we have an aircraft emergency, and we actually happen more often, you know, thankfully the overwhelming majority never amount to anything.
Mm-hmm.
The guy we have in charge, the incident commander, he's our airport operations manager. It's not me. I go to the center and I make sure the key stakeholders are informed. I'll help bring assets to the table. But when you know what hits the fan out there on the airfield, you get good emergency people. It's the same thing at the fire department, police department.
Yeah.
When you have a major incident in town, you don't want the city manager out there running stuff.
No.
You want your battalion, you want your key people in emergency management that you trust and they know their job, and you're smart enough to stay out of their way and help them.
You got to check your ego at the door and say, I'm not here to make myself feel better. I'm here to get the best person for the job to solve the problem at hand.
When there's a major snowstorm, my primary job is to go get pizza.
There you go. Is there I know that you've done a number of things and, you know, you did the Marines and whatnot, but was there ever a career that was kind of, you saw it out, you know, in your peripheral vision and you thought, you know, it's something completely different than what your path took you, but you thought, if I could go back and do it all over again, I might want to give that a shot?
I'll answer that a different question. I really wish I had 8 or 9 lives. Because I'd like to go back and have been an air traffic controller in the FAA. I was a controller in the military. I would have liked to have done 20 years in the Marine Corps and see where I'm at on that. I would have liked to gone ahead and got my pilot's license and gone and been a corporate pilot. Or actually, I understand what I probably would have done is I would have liked to fly cargo. The nice thing about cargo, in fact, I've got a young kid who I've mentored for a number of years. When I remember him coming to me some number of years ago, and he wanted to be a pilot. Today, he's flying, I kid you not, cargo international 747. And the thing about cargo is they don't care if you have a rough landing, and they don't complain because it's cargo. You know that. I would have liked to 10 years ago left Springfield and gone and rubbed that medium hub. You know, it's one that I would have liked to have gone into academics and been the department chair at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. I would be fine staying where I'm at and finishing my career. Part of me says I want the city council to make me city manager, and I want to go be city manager for a while because I think that would be I love Springfield. Mm-hmm. So I not so much, I've never left a job where I burned a bridge, because that's a big no. You never do that. Now, I've left jobs where I was like, I'm kind of ready for something different.
Yeah.
But I wish I had multiple lives, because I'd love to go back and finish those out. And I every career I've done, I'd wish I could go back and see how that plays out. But also, I like where I'm at.
Sure.
I got a chance to spend a lot of time with my kids and have those things. My wife and I have been married 35 years. I don't know. I could not be more blessed. That's where I'm at.
Right on. Brian, this has been such a great conversation. It's a lot of just solid information if someone wants to get into your career field, but also as someone on the outside looking in, it gives me a snapshot into what, airport operations in the industry is kind of like. So I like that kind of stuff when I'm at the airport. I can see the different aspects. I know what those guys are doing, and it might allow me to be a little more patient if things don't go my way sometimes. So thank you for being a guest. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me.
And that wraps up another episode of the Jobs Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. Hopefully you found that interesting. As always, I wait until the end of an interview to ask you to like, subscribe, and share. I feel it's important that I earn that support from you. Thanks again, and we will see you on the next one.